Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I wanted to talk about my top 10 reads of 2021. Now I did read 101 books this year and there were a lot of great ones, but these are the top 10 that stood out to me. There are a lot of honorable mentions, but I'm just going to quickly go through my favorite books of the year. My absolute favorite was definitely A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. This book was amazing. I love Nesta. She means so much to me. I have an entire review up on this book if you are interested. I will link it below. I don't even know what to say. I love this book. It was a lot of adventure, a lot of an emotional journey. The romance was great. I love that she transitioned into more of the adult romance sphere. I feel like her books have always kind of been that anyway, but I really, really loved this book. Still hate the cover of this book. It's hideous, but I love the book and the content and Nesta and Cassian. Incredible. Next on my list is Winter by Marissa Meyer. This is the finale in the Lunar Chronicle series. I was kind of torn between adding Cress by Marissa Meyer and Winter. I love them all. But I like a finale because all the characters really came together and they were fighting, the villain, the queen, and it all came together in such a lovely way. There was a lot of twists and turns I didn't expect, and I grew to love these characters a lot more than I ever thought I would. I wasn't sure how much I would like this series because the sci-fi genre is not something I read as much, but I really, really loved these books, and Winter was the perfect way to really end the story. It was left open as well, and there is that bind up of novellas that I would like to read, but I love this. Cress and Kai and Cinder, everyone is just incredible and I love them, so really enjoyed this book. Next, would this be a list made by me if it did not have a Joanna Shupe book on the list? I think this might be the only Joanna Shupe book I read this year, which is incredibly surprising. But I didn't read a lot of historical romances in general, to be honest. But A Notorious Foul by Joanna Shupe was so, so good. I loved the hero and I loved the way the heroine sort of found connection with him. It was so good. He was like this recluse. He is deaf, but in a world that doesn't really understand that and what that means. And she, instead of shunning him, really found a way to connect with him, and it was just so beautiful. I loved these characters, and Joanna Shupe just knows how to make you fall in love with characters, so I really, really loved this book. Next, one of the longest books, if not the longest book I've ever read, and that is the Miles Morales Ultimate Spider-Man Omnibus. I don't know how to say that word, but by Brian Michael Bendis is the author of the text, and then there's a few different illustrators, I believe. This book was 1,200 pages or something crazy. And it's all of Miles's comics up to date of when this was published, which I'm not sure when that was, 2018, 2019. And I love it so much. I love Miles as a character. I love his journey in becoming Spider-Man. Which is what we see with Peter Parker as well, but in the beginning they're young and they're bright-eyed and they're so excited. One thing bad happens and they get kind of pushed back and they start to really rethink what it means to be Spider-Man. And they think that they know now, and they go out and they are fighting, and it's fantastic. And then a bigger tragedy happens, and they really have an identity crisis and have to choose that they want to be Spider-Man. And Miles is his arc follows that as well, and I just absolutely adored it. He's just incredible. I love the story. I love everything that goes on. Definitely heartbreaking at times, but it's an incredible take on the Spider-Man story, and I hope that he gets to join the MCU one day because I love him. Next was this romance book that I didn't expect to love so much, but I absolutely adored it, and that is One Moment Please by Amy Dawes. It was the cutest story. It was a surprise pregnancy trope where she goes on a date with this guy. I don't remember how they meet, mutual setup or something, and one night stand, and then they decide they're not gonna talk to each other anymore. I don't remember really what bad thing happened, and then she goes on a different date and he was a total creep, and so she climbs out the window and breaks her foot or sprains her foot climbing out the bathroom window and goes into the ER, and the doctor there is the guy from the One Night Stand, and he comes in like, and it's like, you weren't going to tell me that you're pregnant, and he's like, is it mine? Da, da, da. She's like, what? Because she didn't know yet. It's so much fun. I had so much fun reading this book. Amy Dawes is just an absolute joy. So I had a lot of fun with this book, and I kind of want to reread it, to be honest. I should probably just read some of the other series, because I do want to read more of this Wait With Me series. But yeah, it was so much fun. I loved it. Next, another comic, the Empire Collection by Al Ewing. I just basically love anything Al writes. He's an incredible comic book writer. But this was a really fun one. It was the Fantastic Four team, some of the Avengers, and some of the Young Avengers all teaming up. And it was just so good. We got to see Hulkling sort of play into his more galactic side. He was a king for this like space people. I don't know. I don't remember the details. But then the Fantastic Four, which I don't know a lot about, to be honest, but their kids were there too. And it was interesting to see their dynamic. And then a lot of the original Avengers, there's Ghost Rider, Captain Marvel, Captain America, Iron Man, and Black Panther. And then I think She-Hulk was there too. But they were all a lot of fun, and seeing all their interactions. And there was a moment in here, and I don't know if this book was written before or after Infinity War Endgame, but there was a moment in there with Black Panther that like really called to a moment in Infinity War, I think, and I just loved the parallel. I don't know which came first, but I enjoyed it very much, and I love Hulkling and Wiccan's wedding at the end. It was just the cutest thing in the world. Next, pretty much the entire Serpent and Dove trilogy, but specifically I think Gods and Monsters, because like I said earlier with Winter, I love a finale. I just love when things all come together at the end, and this book was just incredible. Blood and Honey probably had the most shock factor and the most like emotional factor, but Gods and Monsters had a lot of really incredible moments, and there were scenes I was like sobbing. It was so good. I love these characters, and I love how the story was handled in the end, and how it took them a really long time, like emotionally, to get through everything, and then also the plot, like to get through everything that had to happen. But they found like their way back to each other in the end, and I just adored it. It was so good. Next, you're probably not surprised by this, but The Deal by Elle Kennedy was another favorite. I loved the entire series, but I think The Deal remains my favorite just because Garrett and... what was her name? I don't remember what her name was. Hannah? I think Hannah. I'm terrible with names, but their story was so good, and the way that they communicate with each other was just really, really good to read. I loved that their interactions and how truthful they were with each other, and there was a steamy scene in here that I will not be forgetting soon. It was so good. Elle Kennedy, she knows how to write, and I love her for it, and I really, really enjoyed this series. Never did I think I'd be reading so many hockey romances. I've never even watched a game of hockey in my life, but these books, absolutely incredible. Next, the Poetry Collection by Misha Collins. Some things I still can't tell you. Poetry isn't something I read a lot of, but Misha Collins, I had to do it. Castiel from Supernatural, if you don't know. I'm a huge fan of Supernatural and of his character, but I'm also just a huge fan of him as a person. He's always seemed really kind, and he has so much love to give into the world. And this was a lot of heartbreak in this story, or in these poems, but I loved reading these thoughts from him and really getting to see him on a different level, and connect in my own way. While my situation is very different than his life, this primarily focused on his sort of development as a person, but also splitting from his wife of like 30 years or something. That might be an exaggeration, but they were together a long time. So I have not gone through that, obviously, but there were still little things to find connection with, and his writing was just absolutely beautiful. He's always been a very thoughtful, like spoken person, but I loved these poems. Lastly, another one of my favorite books this year was A Boy Called Christmas by Matt Haig. I think they call this a modern day classic for a reason. It is such a good book. It is a really, really solid middle grade. It has a lot of Christmas spirit. It follows Nicholas, who later becomes Santa Claus as we know him, but this is his childhood story, his like origin story. It was sad for sure at times, and really made you think a lot about like humanity and like good versus bad and how everyone's a little bit of both. But I really, really enjoyed it, and even though there were moments that made me like were just heart-wrenching, I really like the way that they set up how Santa Claus, a person who wants to just give to the world, how someone like that would become who they are. And I loved it. It was so cute. It's one that I definitely think I'll be rereading. So those were my top 10 favorite books of the year. I read a lot of good books, and while I did have a lot of reading slumps, I am proud of all the books that I read. So let me know what your favorite book of the year was. I decided to just do favorites this year. I didn't have quite enough for a list of least favorites. There were really the biggest one that stands out for me for least favorite was Honey Girl, and you can go back to a reading blog to probably hear my rants about that, or on my Instagram or something. And that was really the only full novel that I really didn't like. Everything else I've been pretty happy with this year, which is a good thing. I'm starting to really learn my taste of what I will and won't like. And I found some really good ones that I will definitely be revisiting in the coming years. I found some books that'll be like rereads for a while, so it cut me off. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye!